Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
and inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Today, I am in conversation with Mathias Buus Madsen, the CEO of Holepunch, a company based in Copenhagen. In this conversation, he shares his journey into software development, how he began as a math student and developed a passion for peer-to-peer technology and became an advocate for that. He explains the foundational concepts behind peer-to-peer systems, their advantages over centralized models, and their application in both personal and enterprise use. Mathias goes on to discuss how these decentralized systems enhance security, minimize infrastructure costs, and improve accessibility, especially for remote or underserved communities. He also compares peer-to-peer networking with blockchain, clarifying the distinct roles each technology plays. He touches upon real-world applications of peer-to-peer technology, including its potential for rural connectivity and resilience in low-bandwidth environments. Mathias also reflects on his transformation from a hacker to an entrepreneur, sharing insights into leadership, scaling a business, and the evolving landscape of decentralized internet solutions. Listen on.
Hi, Matthias. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, when I first saw your profile, I was impressed. The kind of things that you've done, and particularly the peer-to-peer federated kind of model that we'll probably get to that. But before that, we'll probably start with your origin story. What you did, and then how you got into software, what are the things that you've been doing, and then we'll take it from there.
Cool, yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Mathias. I'm originally just a software hacker from Denmark. Right now I run Holepunch, a peer-to-peer company. I'm the CEO there. I have a bunch of smart people working on peer-to-peer technology all the time. I've basically been working in technology my entire adult career. And I've basically been working in peer-to-peer my entire adult career. It's always been extremely fascinating to me to just connect devices, and which sounds really easy and which is really isn't today. Like, it's very, very complicated today. Fortunately, we make a lot of technology that makes that easy. And then just like make protocols where things just talk to each other. I tell this story once in a while, but like basically when I started doing programming, so I don't come from a programming background. I started pretty late with programming. I went to school, normal school, and I studied math at a university. And then part of that, we had a curriculum where we had to do a forced course in engineering, because I'm Danish, and in Denmark they're very worried that they're going to educate all these math people and not have any jobs, because what are math people going to do? That's the question you always get answered. So they made some program, which I didn't like at the time, because it's like, I was a pure math person, but I was like, you have to take some programming to try. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll try. And then it really resonated with me, because, and I'm sure you feel the same way, it's kind of like this idea that the computer can kind of like be an extension of yourself and like fuel your ambition. You get so much power by being able to write code to impact other people's lives and do cool things. And for me, with that feeling, just writing stuff, peer-to-peer was a really natural extension of that, because peer-to-peer for me is like where I can sit and I can write some software, and you can run that software and other people can run the software, but we don't need like any third parties. We don't need any capital. We don't need to like play by the rules. We can just do whatever we want because it's just it's like a swarm of people. And that was really, really fascinating to me. And I started playing around back then just with BitTorrent, which was very big when I was in college. So it kind of tells you my age, I guess. But just like literally just reading through the Wikipedia, understanding how the protocol works. I had intro to JavaScript in school, so that's what I've been doing. And just like, go through, implement protocols in JavaScript for BitTorrent, see how that works. Got very fascinated by that stuff. And it's kind of interesting for me because then that would help me, like, in Denmark, school is pretty liberal and you can kind of like, you have a lot of choice. So that would help me pick courses. So I'll be like, oh, I don't understand this cryptography thing. So I took a cryptography course to understand how that worked. And I was very lucky to have good professors and stuff. Just kind of like got a whole picture. And I've just been like going down that route ever since, just like banging out tons of open source code, and now co-founded a company and have a lot of people doing that. And we're making really, really cool stuff at Holepunch with like the Pairs platform and Keat and stuff to kind of like bring that kind of technology to everybody.
Wonderful. Okay. Normally one talks about either personal applications or enterprise applications.
Yeah.
Where does the peer-to-peer come in, and what are some typical applications so that our listeners also get an idea of
sure,
potential for peer-to-peer?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I think peer-to-peer is one of those topics. It's two simple words, peer-to-peer, but it's like very encapsulating. I think when I talk to people about peer-to-peer today, I'm always like, actually, you're thinking about it wrong, because I say peer-to-peer and people usually think file sharing or something very, very specific, like a very, very specific app, like that's peer-to-peer, that's what you heard about. And if you talk to finance people, peer-to-peer means something completely different. Peer-to-peer to me is actually just like it's a very, very simple model where you say, let's engineer our technology in a way where we don't rely on IPs on the other end, like we don't rely on endpoints, but we rely on capabilities, meaning that if data is self-verifiable, if data is signed, data is encrypted, we don't necessarily trust the people we're working with, and security is really important. I think that's very interesting, both for personal apps and enterprise apps, because it's just, as an architecture, it's actually encapsulating everything. So you can have like a classic centralized system, like a centralized system in the way you and I would probably describe it, as like there's a client and there's a server and many clients connects to the server. You can architect that as a peer-to-peer system. Like there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's kind of like, it's a very boring peer-to-peer system in my point of view, but it's still like, people talking to each other. All the benefits of peer-to-peer in the sense of like everything is encrypted, self-verifiable, that works really well there still, right? It's just really, really good techniques. It's just good engineering. So whenever people talk about like data leaks coming from existing data farms and stuff, I'm always like, well, you should have thought about this stuff more, like defense and dev having more systems. That's really, really important. So I think the long answer here is like peer-to-peer is actually applicable for everything. I think it's definitely shining a lot in like personal apps because it's a way to just enhance our personal apps. But you can make really, really powerful enterprise apps with peer-to-peer also. And I think it's one of those things where I would love, just from a personal point of view, to see like everybody should have a mandatory course in peer-to-peer when they get educated, because it's good to learn these techniques. I remember when I started out, I was making back then also like, just web servers and stuff. And back then, this kind of question was always about HTTP versus HTTPS, like encrypted versus unencrypted. And people would always say, well, sometimes you got to go unencrypted because it's expensive to encrypt. And now, 15 years later, we're like, why would you ever not encrypt? That's insane. Like you just like always run encryption, like Jesus Christ. I think that's going to be the same with like these peer-to-peer primitives in like 5 years, where we're like, how would you ever not have this thing signed? That's insane. You should always be encrypted. So if anything ever leaks, like, whatever.
Because usually when you say blockchain, a lot more people seem to say that, I get that, or I kind of get that conceptually. How different is this from the blockchain concept?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And like, we're all mega nerds, and luckily I have like now also the chance to work with some smart normal humans, marketing people. As nerds, we tend to just go straight to the technical stuff, like like peer-to-peer. Let me explain to you how wires data works over the wire and stuff. Where people are like, I don't. I think blockchain systems and like Bitcoin and stuff has been really good at educating normal people in how these systems are very powerful and how these systems are unstoppable without them ever reading a white paper. That's because it's just like simple explanations of like how untrusted systems work in a good way. Peer-to-peer, I think. So people also come in often and ask that question, like maybe we can just run everything on the blockchain. I think the blockchain shows you like a good technique on how to do these things. Consensus, i.e. like how blocks are ordered, is very important for things like finance. For things like chat, which we run a chat app called Keat. Consensus is still really important, but it's like you can tolerate much more different strategies that are much faster and less expensive, because it's like if your chat reorders, it's not like you lose money. So we focus very much on that latter case of like very small systems, like many, like billions and billions of small systems collaborating with each other rather than one big system, with the trade-offs I give. Yeah, that's just really powerful. Some systems work really well on a blockchain. Some systems work really well on like a classic peer-to-peer system. I think it kind of like, you need to, as a developer, you need to understand a little bit. As a user, doesn't really matter. You should just like use whatever works.
Okay. Yeah. Going back to the question on the typical use cases of the kind of applications one can have. Yeah. When you need to work as a team or as a network, right?
Yeah,
there'll still be some persistence or maybe at least integrations with maybe other applications in the ecosystem.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, basically, yeah, when you have to at some point of time integrate with the enterprise.
Sure, I think like again, like I think about chat is just such a nice way of thinking about these things. I think because so when I use Keat, our peer-to-peer chat app, that's an app where all it is doing from the user's point of view is you just send messages to each other, and like whatever else you associate with chat, like sharing files and stuff like that. And I think that's really interesting as a use case to understand peer-to-peer, because you use that app and you really quickly forget that it's peer-to-peer, because it's just showing you that the ideas of centralization is not really something that has to be user-facing or blocking in any way. Like you're just sending things to each other. The flows we have made as a world for these kind of like apps today, I think actually and I'll get to your main question in a second, but I think they kind of fits the model of peer-to-peer today, because like if you think about it, when you like text somebody on Signal or something like that, it usually starts by you meeting that person somewhere, or out of band on Twitter or whatever, and they send you their contact, and then you add the contact, and then you open a message. It's like very actually decentralized in that way, where you have like some proof out of band where you're like, this is the person I want to talk to. Either you get a referral or you talk to them. So you don't necessarily need like a centralized hook there to do discovery, which is really interesting for me, because it just fits the P2P model very well, where the user doesn't need to know how that happens. It's just very natural. Obviously, like there's enterprise apps where that kind of stuff gets very important. Like I think if you think about stuff like identities, like, if you and I work at the same company and we're chatting, I would like to know that, that you work at my company, no matter how I discover you. So like there has to be some sort of hook into some sort of system that's like verifies that you and I are working, so we have that trust immediately. That's very natural. And I don't think there's anything stopping integration from that into like a peer-to-peer ecosystem. I think the integration works better when and sorry to get a little bit technical, but like when you make those systems again with the same ideas of peer-to-peer, where it's like, a signature that signs that you work here and stuff like that, cryptographic signature, versus some API call that says that you do it, because that's a much stronger guarantee. But there's all kinds of ways you can integrate these things into existing peer-to-peer systems, which doesn't hurt it, just makes it stronger, and allows for more decentralization, right? So, because I think to some degree, those hooks are very one-timing. Like, it's kind of like how many times when you use GitHub do you log into GitHub? You probably log into once, and then you get some session that you use for a long time. It's the same with peer-to-peer systems. So you have this like association stuff, like log in once, which again in a P2P system would be some cryptography, where you can associate that with some enterprise thing, and the rest is just all our devices just running like crazy, which is awesome.
So does it then mean that the devices need to have more compute storage
Yeah, I mean, it's like I actually don't think it necessarily means that they need to have more. Like our devices have tons of compute today, we just don't utilize it. It's kind of crazy that if you buy a low-end phone today, it like has more compute, right? Because of the way technology works than any device we had like 10 years ago, right? It's like really, really intense how much compute the devices have storage today. Doesn't mean that we have infinite storage, but like when you add up the accumulative storage of our devices, the number gets really high, right? Like there's just like 32 gigabytes on every device for every user is like an insane amount if you have 1 million users versus centralizing that storage in one way. So like the numbers are actually in the peer-to-peer favors. Then obviously like you need to do more compute and stuff in a peer-to-peer system. But my point is, that's what I tried to say earlier, that compute, which is basically just decryption and like verification, you should be doing anyway. That's kind of like, if you're not doing that today in a centralized system, you're gonna get pwned at some point, and all your data is gonna disappear because you gotta not trust these things upfront. That's like how everything goes terrible. And like these algorithms today, because they've been made many years ago, are in hardware. They're really, really fast, right? So like when we look at things we're optimizing in our apps, none of the stuff is that part. Like there's plenty of other stuff we're always working on making better and faster, but none of it is like the primitives needed for doing just like absolutely needed for peer-to-peer technology. And I think that's really, really important. And I think going back to the thing you said earlier about the blockchain, people tend to also, because again, it's hard technical stuff, but like conflate those ideas. Like a blockchain burns lots of energy as a feature. Like that's really, really important for maintaining the blockchain. But like a peer-to-peer system doesn't need to. It can do much, much smarter things because the networks are smaller.
Yeah, the reason for my question is that, see, I'm associated with an NGO.
Yeah.
And we work with rural grassroots NGOs in India.
Yeah, cool.
And there, the problems of both, I mean, even if you take phones, many of them are either non-branded or these clones that may not behave the normal way or the expected way. And add to that the connectivity issues.
Yeah.
So how would a peer-to-peer network, or if you were to visualize a peer-to-peer solution, what should one be looking at? For instance, I was looking at trying to see if this would be something that would be useful to create communities.
Yeah, sure.
That can share, that can learn from each other, and support each other.
I think it's very interesting what you say there, because if you have a device, for example, that's like low connectivity, that's one of the things people often ask me, because again, peer-to-peer sounds like everybody needs to be connected all the time and yada yada. But it's actually, the cool thing about peer-to-peer is that it gives you options. Peer-to-peer is actually one of those systems that work insanely well in no connectivity, because connectivity is not required. It's just looking at data. So if you have the data on your phone, you can do whatever you want. And connectivity is not needed for you to do new things. So like imagine a chat where you're writing a message in a centralized system. When you write that message is not really sent until you connect to somebody and that message has left your device, right? Your app might fake it, like you might render it and say it's like a draft or whatever, but the systems are like, doesn't really count. In the peer-to-peer system, that's not the case. In the peer-to-peer system, that's just, the message leaving your device, obviously very important but it doesn't matter for correctness or stuff like it's the same operation on the device. So when you're in a jungle and you use a peer-to-peer chat app and you write, and then you get to somewhere where you have some connectivity, that just means that you'll sync, but your stuff is still there. And that's true for any peer-to-peer application, not just chat, which is a really, really powerful thing for the connectivity things. And it's funny because I've been traveling a lot like the last 6 months. And so I have not like a low-end thing, but like a medium high-end thing. But I've just noticed, just when you travel, because you go in between airport Wi-Fi's and stuff like that, how terrible the experience is with most app, and how my peer-to-peer apps, Key especially, they just all works the same because you don't notice it, and that's really, really powerful. Also for things like the ones you're describing there. So you trade a little bit of storage, right? So in that case, you trade a little bit of storage. But if you think about it, storage for like things like chat and stuff, it's really small.
Yeah.
Like we're probably using more bandwidth here in this call than we ever used in any chat app ever, because chat is just text. So you're trading a little bit of storage for full offline connectivity, but the protocols don't care. It's like all the same. So it's easy for the implementers. Then for like compute and stuff, yeah, I mean, obviously that's something where there's a scale, right? There's a scale from like compute where you and I are sitting with an Alpacus and like adding numbers. It's not going to run really well in that environment, to like a low-end device that has this, whatever APIs that are then needed, which is pretty widely deployed. Like I said today, like encryption APIs, as long as they're on a chip, which they tend to be even on low devices today. Yeah, we try to run everything on really low devices. I'm sure we have work to do still, but it's very interesting because our framework, the pair framework, which we call it, because pair sounds like peer, it's running on JavaScript, and we actually it's funny you mentioned that, because like last week, one of our guys just made a binding for this very, very low resource JavaScript engine called JavaScript, then because we needed to run on a very, very low end device where it used like 100 kilobytes of memory versus like tens and 20s of megabytes of memory normally, and that just works because the engine doesn't care, right? Because you're kind of like abstracting that away. So there's definitely options for doing really, really, really low. And like our goal as a company is basically we want to be able, and honestly we're very close to this, but like we want to be able to run every smart light bulb you have in your house should be able to run like a peer-to-peer engine that should be the same code to some degree as this running on your phone, as running on your thing. So you have like one secure foundational protocol layer that you can build any kind of apps on, that's open source, that's verifiable, that's owned by you. Yeah, that's like very, very doable. But it's also because probably that light bulb had more compute today than we had in the rocket going to the moon or whatever, right? Like I'm not because we're geniuses, it's just technology has become really good. So even low end technology today is really good. Because I think also a future that I'm very excited about with the stuff you're mentioning there, especially in a place like India, where I'm guessing you have, because it's a huge country, right? You have remote areas where connectivity is just, there's like one tower every. Peer-to-peer is really interesting in those scenarios, because peer-to-peer also doesn't need, it's not like all the data needs to go from like a device to a data center to go back to the device. So you can kind of like imagine a remote village somewhere where they just have a local network, because that's very cheap to set up, like a radio tower or whatever, that's not connected to anything, where data just swarms between people in that village. So like you can have an inter-village chat that is compatible with the rest of the world's chat. It's just that only syncs whenever the satellite crosses over that city, right? Then it syncs out without the users they're carrying, which I think is really, really important. Like, so as a human using it, even though I talk about technology and it sounds complicated, the human just writes messages. Technology takes care of the rest. So like there's a global internet outage, this village is still working, right? So it's kind of like flipping the head around, where probably right now they're used to not having anything work all the time, where it would then just be the opposite. So I think that's also really, really important. And I think we tend to forget that. We tend to think that people are just very connected, but like as more and more people get online, the challenges of that is just immense. Sorry.
Okay. So two things. Again, going back to the same kind of use case of what can we do in rural India. When you have the end users who are not very tech savvy, the possibilities of being compromised, not because of this, because they're going to be running other apps as well. Maybe doing other things. Or this, we talk about the supply chain attack or the injections and stuff like that. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting question we did. So I've been working in this space for a long time, and we did a very interesting project. I didn't do it, but a friend of mine did it on our technology like 5-10 years ago, where they had a similar thing where they were doing some non-profit data collection where they were doing some mapping thing. And it's funny because it's exactly the scenario you're describing. They would run this stuff on like devices that was like low-end user devices from normal people that was just those devices were like infected with malware, right? Because like they would download all kinds of crazy apps. So the interesting thing was there, and that's what they told me after, was that the peer-to-peer stuff really helped them there, because peer-to-peer just treats everybody as an adversary. So like, even if you and I are connecting, right, it's like saying, don't trust the other guy at all. Like, verify everything on your end. So all this malware, which was not, I don't even think it was like super malicious, but it's just like, it's corrupting files. They would like change these files, but the system would detect it, because it's like, oh, the hashes don't match and whatever. So you would get it from another source. So, and obviously, like, there's this, it's a scale here again, where at some point this is just not going to work. But it's really interesting, I think, to have these kind of protocols where, and I think people tend to forget that we need protocols where even when we trust each other, we don't trust each other, because then everything just become much more secure in that way. And also just, again, just for end users. So you always hear these stories, I think, also when I read about the news, like, and it's also the way it's kind of like described in movies, right? Somebody will say, we penetrated the firewall, so now we're inside the Pentagon, right? Like, because we got through the firewall. That's kind of like 2000s thinking. We need to think about how that, okay, sure, that doesn't matter, because it's like you have every system is like firewall by itself, because the data is like that. So that's what a peer-to-peer thing really helps you with. So I think that's a cool way to think about it, because basically that means that when you have devices that are just bad or very broken, obviously it's going to impact performance on the system, because you're gonna lose more. But that's it. It's not like it's gonna spread viruses or anything like that, because it doesn't trust anybody. So I think that's a super interesting point. And this kind of stuff, I feel like every time we talk about it, like, it gets more and more relevant every year, because attacks are getting worse and worse, and like malware is getting more and more deployed, obviously.
Again, continuing on the same use case or situation, when these are not very high-end devices, the first is, how do we get the adoption? This is more a cultural thing, not a technology question. Because a peer-to-peer network, as I understand, is that every node will probably be serving others, right, at any time.
But also, it's also like, to add to the complexity of that, I think, like, the weakest peer-to-peer system, the hardest peer-to-peer system is a peer-to-peer system with two people, because one goes offline, half the capacity of the network is gone, which is like the worst possible scenario. And a peer-to-peer system with like 10 people, it's much better, which sounds, and it is a huge feature, but also means that bootstrapping is obviously harder. Luckily, that's like in the range of like where it's in our favor, right, to some degree, because you just need to help the network kick off, and then it helps. I think so. Having been in peer-to-peer for like 15, 20 years almost, not 20 years, it's not true, but 15 years. I think it's like the times are, so we tend to, and I'm a nerd, right? So I tend to talk about this stuff from a technical point of view, because I think the tech is just really, really exciting. But I think when I started talking about this 15 years ago, most people wouldn't care that much, honestly. Like, they would just be like, it's that file sharing thing or whatever. Like, it's the thing you can use to get illegal movies, which was very big then. In the evolution of the world in those 15 years, it has become just much, much, much more on everybody's agenda. They might not say peer-to-peer, but they say privacy, they say security, they say other things that to me is just the same thing. And now when I talk about this kind of stuff with my family also, it's kind of like, privacy is really, really important for them. Whereas like 5-10 years ago, they were like, I have nothing to hide. Now they're like, well, I have nothing to hide, but I don't think people should look at it anyway, because clearly that's not working very well. So I think there's been a huge cultural shift in the favor of these kind of technologies. And for us as the nerds to take a step back and not explain the tech, but just explain like what this unlocks, I think that's resonating really well with a lot of people. That's what we're seeing, at least, because it's just, who doesn't want to have a private chat? Like, that's really important. Who doesn't want to have a chat where like you don't have to pay anybody any month to do stuff? Who doesn't want to have a chat that's like not encrypted, that's not running on advertisement, etc.? So it's just really good apps. So that's really, really important. And I also think, if you look at just the world in the last couple of years, how volatile it's been with wars and like just the volatility of the world. We have stopped to take for granted like connectivity, and so I'm in Denmark. It's near the Baltic Sea, and every week you hear a story about some cable being cut because somebody's trying to do something or nobody knows. So this idea that we're just always online all the time, we used to think that was just kind of like something that happened in remote India, where like, oh, that's their problem, but they'll get fixed at some point. Now we're like, holy shit, like it can even happen anywhere, because there can be natural disasters, there can be people who don't want you to be connected, there can be politics, there can be censorship. So technology that doesn't care about that and just finds a way, all of a sudden I think becomes really important for everybody. And I think that message is really starting to resonate, because again, it's getting harder and harder to not want that, right? Like, who doesn't want an unstoppable app? Like, who doesn't want to have an app that like will work when a comet hits the earth and whatever, right? Like it's like obvious stuff. I like to say in the company, like, the world is moving in our direction. I don't know if it's necessarily good for the world, but it's definitely good for peer-to-peer. But that's also just how these things evolve. And like, again, technology finds a way. We, like I said earlier, 10, 20 years ago, we didn't think we needed encryption. And now here we are, and we're like, of course we need encryption. And I think that's kind of like the same thing.
Philosophically, I think a peer-to-peer approach is probably a way to reduce a lot of these global tensions once people connect with others. Yeah, now,
totally.
Now a little segue. So far we've been talking, probably somehow got dragged into my curiosity on peer-to-peer and technology. What has been your experience of moving from being a hacker or a techie to an entrepreneur?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think I used to think of it as like that, like, that you move, you kind of like, you're going from one box to another. But really what happens is that you never really leave your hacker box, and then you go into the other box also. I think I've started to realize, for me as a person, as an engineer, like, some people do like puzzles, right, to relax. And I think an engineer at some point they just solve engineering problems. They're like, that's how I relax. You find some interesting problem, you're like, can I do it or not? That sounds very nerdy, but we're also mega nerds. So I love engineering, and I love solving puzzles. I still do, and I do it a lot. I just do it way less now than I used to for work, but with the benefits of like working with really, really smart people that can do that also. And yeah, that's a huge transition, and I think everybody will find that's a transition. But I think you learn to realize that your potential lies in unlocking other people to do what you think you do best, and not really letting go of the old stuff. Because again, like, I still do a lot of programming. I do way less than I used to, but I have like bursts of creativity. And then luckily I have other people to clean it up and like catch all my mistakes, which I make a lot of. Like, having a team of smart people that can do what you do but better is like the biggest unlock to realizing that, holy shit, like, that's how we actually scale these things. We work on tremendously hard problems. Thinking you can do it all yourself is a mistake, and learning how to scale is essential, and learning how to navigate that. And like, I think, and I also think like an engineering background where you're used to solving hard problems also give you like really good insights into understanding this classic problem of like, two people are working and they're blocked by each other, but they don't know. And like, you as a person with like lots of experience just immediately can cut through that and be like, I understand why, and here's how you fix it, and then learn it. But yeah, it's been a transition for sure. But I enjoy it. I love programming. I'm the guy in the weekend. I'll whenever my family allows it, I'll open the laptop and I'll just do it for fun. I would do it for free also if I didn't get paid. Like, it's like it's a great mental exercise for me. And like I said, some people do gaming. I do hacking. I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way.
That's really nice to hear. But what about the other things that you need to do as a CEO? There's probably accounts to keep, look at the cash flows and marketing, sales.
Well, yeah, I'm lucky to work with a lot of really smart people in that area also. And I'm sure every accountant who works with a programmer or ex-programmer hates them because, we're the kind of people I submit the budget in like, a CSV file instead of like some Excel thing because and I have a little program generating it and stuff like that. But yeah, I think like, we always underestimate just the human nature of doing things. When you're in charge, you need to deal with just a lot of humans and just a lot of things that pop up with that, which is like just the same as running anything else. And that's really challenging. And it's like, I think also like a weakness as us as engineers is that we obviously massively underestimate just how hard this is, how complex it is, because it sounds really easy because we're like, oh, that's not like, I just worked on a really hard problem. How hard is that? It's like, it turns out that's just harder than anything. But like, surrounding yourself with smart people is always, again, like it's a universal hack to do anything. And for me, that's been very beneficial. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's also like, I've been doing like serious leadership now, I think for like 5 years. I used to do, work in open source and open source, I still do, but like run projects there. And you learn a lot of the same things there because it's also like organizing like a team of chaos and dealing with human issues and like somebody doesn't like somebody else or somebody is very into something and like learning how to nourish that. I think it's all the same thing. So that really helps you a lot just preparing for this kind of things. But yeah. I love it. I would not do anything else. I think as programmers, again, like, going back to where I started, was that like feeling of you sit with your laptop and your couch and you feel like you can like impact the world. At some point, you also realize, well, to actually do this, to actually, change everything, we do need to raise some money. We need a big team. We need to have that team run well. We need to hire people. We need to hire non-programmers, all the stuff you just said, accounting and stuff, to actually impact things in a way where people also understand that this is sustainable, that this is something that's going to be around for a while, that you can invest in this. And that's just a really, really big unlock. I think a mistake a lot of people do when they come in from programming is they're like, oh, I'm very good at programming, so I'll start a company and then I'll just do the programming and then I'll get somebody to do the leadership. Huge mistake. Like, because the vision lies with you, right? And like you're the person who want to see this change, so you just got to do everything at once. And that's what nobody ever tells you. Like the job is just you do everything. Like you just work 8,000 hours and you do everything, and you do it because you love it.
So in the peer-to-peer space, what is a business model?
That's a really good question. Like, and that's I think that's normally like the gotcha question we get a lot where people are like, haha, I got you now, because.
No, not a gotcha question. This is more for me to understand.
Yeah, I just mean like it's always the one clever guy at the conference who's always asking me that, like, haha. I think it's like the business model on the web, right? And actually this is like almost, I think it was almost part of my education back then, because you learn about like freemium models and things like that.
Yeah.
I think we all been very, very indoctrinated into thinking about these things just from a centralized point of view. Like basically the idea is, and this is like the playbook, right? You'll build something centralized, you get a ton of people, you build a wall around it, you'll extract resources from that. People will pay you money, more people will pay you money, you'll build like an empire that's just guarding that stuff. And then peer-to-peer, you come in and you say, well, forget all that. There's no guardrails, every data is flowing free. And then people, you're immediately like going to, so what's the business? Which is really true, right? Because that part of the business is just gone now. I think the point of the peer-to-peer business is that it's not a data economy in that way where you're just extracting money from data, but you can make any kind of business on peer-to-peer still, right? So I like to think about things before we got really, really brainwashed with that kind of thinking. I used to subscribe to great apps because they're great apps. Like I used to have, and I still do, like I use like, my text editor that I use every day. I pay money for that every month because it's just really, really cool. The guys do an amazing job developing it. Not by extracting resources from me, but just by making really, really good products. There's tons of services the world needs, even in the peer-to-peer system, that people will pay for. If you make music, I want to pay you to make the music because, again, it's how the world should work versus like these extortion economies. Peer-to-peer is really good for that. So I think the way to think about business models and peer-to-peer is like, you're not going to have like mega empires controlling one thing. At least that's not the world I want to see. You're going to have tons of small, medium-sized and big-sized things competing in a marketplace where everything is compatible, which is much more interesting for the consumer because it's a level playing field. And at Holepunch, we're making apps, right? But we're also making the infrastructure. And I think the infrastructure, to some degree, is kind of like, it's like the highways and the roads of the world. I don't think that's not a business model really. It's kind of like, that's just infrastructure we need to actually make the world grow, and we're happy to contribute that to the world. Obviously, apps, businesses on top needs to exist and needs to provide value, and people need to make money. But that's just, again, making good businesses. You have a huge upside in peer-to-peer, which is that you have no cost really. Because peer-to-peer, you don't run infrastructure, and people tend to forget about the cost because they're just so fixated on that business model of like locking everybody inside. But there's a real cost, and that's why you do it on the web. That's why you extort people in that way, because every time you add a user to centralized services, costs you money. Like there's a database that needs to maintain data. There's a connection that needs to happen. There's interaction. That's all loss for you. Loss. You need to raise a lot of money. You need to pay that money back. In peer-to-peer, you're saying there is none of that. Obviously, you still pay people to work on your stuff, right? It's not communism, but there's not like a central point that holds all the data. So all of a sudden, your business becomes, well, we pay people, but that's a fixed budget thing. So how can we turn a profit from that? Well, we sell services. We do things on top. We sell apps. Our profit scheme is now like a cost are like this. So we just need some business that goes like this, and then everything in between is just the margin to help grow the business, which is really nice. Where like a normal system, they go like this, and that's a huge benefit for the individual. So I like to think of this also from a human single point of view. Like running peer-to-peer businesses as a single person is insanely powerful, because the cost you have is just yourself, and that's very adjustable, like a small team. And the money you can make is like unlimited, because you can just make a really, really good product, and as long as people like the product, you're in business. And so it's really simple, right? But it's not going to be locking things down. It's not going to be like an extortion economy, and that's going to take some adjustment, I think, for people. And like the whole world of venture capital funding today is kind of focused on the other thing of like, subsidize something, lock people in, raise the moat, squeeze people out, repeat. That model is not going to work. That's probably like the biggest thing that needs to take some adjustment. And it's probably the most controversial thing we do. And it also took us a long time to find people with funding to help us build that, because it's kind of like saying, we don't want your money. It also takes, in my opinion, takes the internet away from this kind of like zero-sum game and turns it into more of a bigger economy where everybody can contribute in their own way. And I'm especially excited about unlocking individuals, because I think that's what's really missing in the world of compute today. The individuals can just run things at home that provide value. Your podcast, for example, right? Like that you can just sell these if you wanted to and just take all the profits, because it's just the infrastructure is just there. So that businesses that make $10,000 per month are insanely valuable for the individual. Way for you to grow and become very successful, versus having to then fork over like $9,000 of those dollars, and it's just kind of like a hobby. So that's what I'm very excited about in the business world of this. And for us, as at Holepunch, like obviously we're making this technology for free, right? But we're also making apps, and we're very interested in just making a big impact on that.
Yeah, interesting.
It's a whole podcast by itself, I think, to some degree, like just talking about this.
I'm sure, because you need to probably crawl through the firewalls and other guardians that are already there to establish this peer-to-peer connect, people who are probably within the walls. Yeah, interesting. So I didn't realize how long we've been talking. I would definitely love to get some career tips from you for two segments of people. Now, one, those who are considering a career in IT.
Yeah.
And two, those who are probably going through a mid-career crisis.
Nice.
Whether from being an enterprise developer or doing something else, if one were to look at specializing in P2P or probably open source, would you have any tips for them?
I mean, it's funny because we have, on Keat, we have like a developer channel where people will come in, and there's nothing. So I come from just a self-taught background, and there's nothing a lot more than talking to the young people of the day that come into that channel. We actually have a lot of people from India, because you can really see India's IT economy obviously is massive, but also like just excitement and like people doing these weird, personal, interesting things that like tinkering with something. It's really growing a lot there, I can see. And there's nothing a lot more than interacting with those guys and just, that feeling of youth where they're just like, oh, I'm just a person. I'm like 18 years old and I'm just working 20 hours a day to do this thing for fun. That kind of energy. as a young person is completely unmatched by anybody. As a young person today, I would just massively leap into that. Like, don't care what anybody tells you. Don't care about too much about your career. Just find that IT niche, the puzzle, and just pull on it and just go freaking nuts. And you'll get to be the smartest person in like 2 years. Because at the end of the day, the thing that matters most, I think, is just hard work, honestly. And I know that's kind of like a trope, and people will tell you that a lot. But like, if you have the energy, you can learn anything as long as you keep trying. And with IT and with open source and like peer-to-peer and all this stuff, all the tools are there. Mm-hmm. People love to help you. People love to talk to you. It's a very welcoming community once you understand how to navigate it. So just tinker, build the same thing people have built before, learn to understand it, like re-implement all the protocols. Taking things apart, putting them back together is like an incredible way to work. We're living in like the age of obviously like AI and AI assisted software, and people I think are very scared of that. And for me, that's just really exciting because it means that we can just tinker more and we can take more things apart. And like the boring parts of engineering, to some degree, is writing the code, and it's good to understand it and you need to understand it, but the tools are there to help you. So I would just go massively fast on that. And having worked with a lot of younger people in that way, I can just see how, I'm in my late 30s and I can see how little I evolve every year. And then you talk to somebody in their 20s and you can just really see like from 20 to 21 to 22, how they're just doubling every year. You don't realize that at the time, but that's incredible. And that's why you need to take advantage of that. And just before you have any responsibilities, just work, become insanely hard. And I think to some degree, that's my same advice for people who are in a career crisis, because we've all been in career crisis. And I think for a lot of people in IT, it kind of, obviously there are different kinds of crises, but one we normally hit is this like career plateau where you're in a place where I think you feel like you're good, you learned a lot of stuff, but you're not really reaching that next level. Mm. And I think the same advice applies. Like, find the time, just tinker, take things apart. Obviously finding the time can be really hard. So that's like a priority you need to make. Learn the stuff, build, put everything on GitHub. Don't care about what people think. Just put it online. Make peer-to-peer apps. I think that's a good way to also just put things online and kind of like reach that plateau yourself. Probably underestimating yourself. The smartest people I work with in general are not the people who are geniuses. It's just the people who are smart enough and then work really hard. And people tend to forget that. And that's like what 80% of people, right? So it's easy.
Yeah, you make it sound easy, but I'm sure it takes a lot of work.
I mean, I was just saying, like, my point is more like energy is the most underestimated value in any kind of person. So just, get the energy and you can do anything. That sounds easy, but it's at least not like gain 20 IQ points. I think that's hard. Energy is a lot easier.
Yeah. So one last question. With so many things going on around you and all these new exciting technologies and all that, what is the secret of you staying cheerful and grounded?
Well, that's like, maybe this is like counter to what I just said, but like I think focus is really, really important. And that's, I think the one thing I see when I look at my friends and colleagues who are very successful, they're all just very, very focused. Being able to block everything out and just focus on one thing and not get distracted in this world of distractions is I think is key for me for that. And some people are born with more focus skills than others, but there's a lot of things here you can learn, and there's a lot of tools that can help you just to do that. And I think that helps me a lot now. That would also give that advice to everybody. Just like, you gotta take bets in life, and focus, I think, to some degree means bets where you're like, well, we're doing this now, so let's see if we can make this work. And there might be that every week there's some new exciting thing that somebody says, but you gotta just hunker down and figure out what you're doing. Obviously knowing also when to stop, but like, again, everything is a balance. But that's been really helpful for me in that regard, I think.
Yeah. On that note, thanks a lot, Mathias, for
yeah, no worries, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, and sharing your perspectives. And I'm sure we'd love to probably have a conversation again, get a little deeper sometime later. But not today. Thanks a lot.
Do it in a remote village in India where we can test the peer-to-peer aspects of all this stuff.
Yeah, we could probably run some experimenting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That would be awesome. I think that's very exciting.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.